Your positive behavior is rewarded with the opposite behavior. What behavior are you training?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like,
So it's like, oh, I'm going to reward all my training with a rest day. Like even that concept. So what's your rest day? I'm going to lay on the couch and do nothing. Matt Fraser 101. It's like, okay, so you just rewarded all your hard work with a non-productive behavior.
yeah. You should be stretching,
Yeah.
you should be working on mobility. There's things you can do that aren't training. But it's like, it's the same concept of like, yeah, same thing. Like people train so hard to then eat shit. And it's like, well, you've rewarded yourself with a behavior that's going to negatively impact your next session.
So then what would you suggest then to reward yourself?
It's an intrinsic reward. Like your reward isn't like,
The
okay, I
reward
get the
should-
shiny thing at the end of the tunnel.
Some people are motivated by rewards.
But that's a short-term motivation,
Yeah, that's
because that will
it,
never
yeah.
last. So it's
Yeah.
like if you're motivated by the shiny object at the end of the rainbow, like once you get to the end of the rainbow, it's game over. It's Mike Tyson all over again, winning that world champion
My
heavyweight.
depression is so bad.
Yeah, once he won the heavyweight champion, he fell into depression because he was the best. Well, how do you get better than the best? You know, but then it's like Michael Jordan wins 6 rings in a row or 7 rings in a row or whatever it is. The you know, Tom Brady wins all those championships, and it's because, you know, winning wasn't enough for them. They wanted to become immortal. They wanted to be better than everyone else. They wanted to keep improving. They focused on everything that they could to become the best version of themselves. And I find, yeah, a lot of people, they find that shiny object. They're like, oh yes, like I want to train 5 times this week so I can have a huge weekend. And then their Monday is usually ruined because the huge weekend leaks onto Sunday. It gives them bad sleeping habits for Monday. And then they get to Monday, they don't perform in their session. And now that's deducted from their bank account. So instead of having $100 at the start of the week in their physical bank account.
And then it ties into that past, future, and present, where it's like, okay, well, a lot of your life is spent reflecting on the past and then trying to be like, whether it's fake pessimistic or trying to have that foresight of the future, but you're never ever present.
Yeah.
And that's where most people sit at the moment, is most people are either reflecting on past behaviors or trying to look forward to future behaviors, but then they're never paying attention to what's directly in front of them.
Yeah.
Like, classic example. Okay, I have a choice. So I came up here before, all right? Like, just my internal dialogue as a reference. And I was like, I can check my phone, all right, before we do this podcast, or I can do the dishes. And I was like, what is going to give me more fulfillment?
Dishes.
And
It's a
I
task.
was like, yeah. And I was like, nah, phone down, do the dishes. But like, I was still faced with the same choice that everyone has. But I was like, okay, I'm aware of it now.
Yeah.
And I was like, do the dishes. Future you's going to be like, look, sweet, I don't have to do the dishes.
I have a my one for the kitchen, and it's like, no matter what, like the dishwasher must be empty before you begin prepping meals or cooking and things.
It's just an interesting conversation, because it's like, yeah, like it's just trying to look a little bit more into the behaviors, because the behaviors become your habits become your reality.
Yeah.
So it's
Because
like,
what you do now sets you up for your future, pretty much.
Exactly. And it's like, but then it's like,
it's just trying to dive a little bit deeper into it and be like, are we actually just setting people up for failure? Like, it's not a nice cushiony question, but it's probably a discussion that has to be had, where it's like, maybe we should just think about it like that, like what we were saying, it's not a holiday, it's you get to travel.
yeah, it should be for experiences.
Traveling for experiences and things like that, but it's not a holiday from your life.
And
Yeah.
some people who work for the weekend, like...
Same concept, yeah.
Yeah, and it's the weekend warriors. It's always a big thing. Like people who train for the weekend as well. It's like that's only like.
And they binge on the weekend.
Well, yeah, they train, then they get to the weekend, they watch the footy, they hang out with mates, they go out for beers, and it's like they get to Monday, and then like, yeah, I get it. It's like you want to be social and stuff, but there's limits to these things. You need to, like, you shouldn't just stop training on Friday and start it again on Monday.
And it's not, I'm going out to get pissed.
Yeah.
It's, I'm going out to make memories with my friends.
Yeah.
Like, and whatever that looks like, it's not tied to drinking and getting fucked up and negative behaviors. Like, yeah, you might end up having a bit of a wild night, but it's like, it's probably going to be a positive experience just because of the way you frame it.
Yeah, and then you can be there for your mates when they make those wrong decisions. You lead by example. They're not going to want to get pissed anymore because they're like, oh, he had such a great time, or she had such a great time, and he wasn't like drunk, or they weren't on drugs, or they weren't off their head. They're like they were like controlled. They were present, and they looked after us when we needed them. They're a really good friend. We can turn to them, and then it's like they look up to you then, and then you can help guide them in your own ways to be more positive.
A funny trait, like talking to a lot of people, and you probably say this as well, one of the most attractive traits or like expressions of strength is someone who will still hold their own point of view even when they're basically outside of the social norm. So like, yeah, when they're in a group discussion and it's about the drinking and stuff like that and the peer pressure, and they're like, nah, I'm not interested, bro.
That's really kudos to Tyler there, because I feel like that is such a big trait that Tyler has.
And that's something that people lack. Like they...
Why you even though sometimes I feel like you can get peer pressure.
You're always going to get tempted.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. Yeah. But if you are the odd one out, you'll still stand by what you say. Unless, right, and this is where my only, like, not issue, but, like, I like seeing both sides of the story. So obviously I would never be, I don't think, very set on my ways and closed-minded about a situation. But if you can at least understand, empathize, etc. with that other side, but still stand by, your opinion. Be like, oh no, like
you don't have to agree, but you should listen.
Exactly.
You should be like, look, I understand your perspective.
Yeah.
Like that. Wow, that's a really interesting way to think. Like I'll keep that in mind and I'll compare that to my own opinion and see if I can be changed. Like you should be going into conversations willing to be convinced. Like you're like, instead of going in like arms folded, like what's this guy talking about? He has no idea.
You're not going in to win. It's not an argument.
No,
it's a discussion.
And that's it. It's like it's going.
There's no winners. Like if you think about it, like if we both go and we argue at each other, we both walk away thinking we're right, and we both walk away angry. Who won?
No one, exactly.
No one got anything out of the conversation. So
And
it's absolutely fucking pointless.
It's almost like, like if they're upset or they're like firing and it's like, okay, like, like what did I do wrong? Like, how did I offend you? And then they tell you and you'll be like, okay, what else? And you just keep unloading it until they eventually get what's on their chest.
There was one I was reading from one of the psychologists, and he said the social problem with divorce is not monogamy, it's not to do with financial, like we always say, it's the financial stress that makes people fight. It's the sex that makes people fight. And it's like...
It's under communication.
He's like, no. It's the communication of expectations.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, those are things, but that's not what made them argue. The communication of, like, hey, I expect you to make this much money per week or save this much money was never had.
Yeah.
So the expectations were like, hey, you should just know what I expect of you.
Yeah.
But it was never clearly communicated, and then that creates the argument. Same thing with sex. I like this. Never communicated. It's just, you should know by my body language, or you should know by this. I was like, fuck, that's actually pretty interesting. How it's like...
Communication is literally one of the most important, like, if not the important things.
Yeah, and it made me think, because I was like, because I'm someone, I've always had a lot of secrets, and I just keep them to myself, and I was like, go through personal development, I'm going to have to learn to not do that.
Yeah.
And just be honest, and whatever happens, happens. Like, irrelevant, the result is irrelevant, it's the behavior that's important, where it's like, okay, I'm learning to be more transparent, more open, and communicate better.
Yes.
It started for me because I was reflecting on the fact that why do I always end up in toxic relationships? And it's like, and then I was like, okay, well, it's me. Like, because it is, like, those behaviors, those things that I did, those secrets that I have, like, they were all toxic behaviors.
And then you attract the
and then
person.
I attract that same person because of those behaviors. And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, like, I'm sitting here being like I value loyalty, like, I value someone who's not accessible. Like, those are all my high values that I look for in someone. But then I have to be that as well. Yeah, and it's a hard thing, and it's a hard truth, and we'll probably talk a bit about it in the podcast. But judgment is always passed on morals and standards that you can't uphold yourself.
Yeah.
Which inherently just sets you up for disappointment, because you are now passing. I'm judging you about not turning up to work on time, but I'm not turning up to work on time, or like that kind of stuff. And it's like the amount of times we see that is just absolutely fucking ridiculous.
I can't stand leaders like that, because it's like, you need to lead by example. That is, I 100% think that like a good leader, or someone who runs a business, etc., they are the one like doing those things, because you are putting those behaviors in practice. Then your employees are going to see that, and they're going to go, we need to be on time, we need to make that effort to do this. If you're not seeing it in your employees,
You say less than you do more.
Yeah.
And that's
It's all pretty simple. It's just the fact that we just get a little. For me, like, I know we talk about communication is one of the biggest parts. I think we've become. We went from not saying enough to saying too much and doing too little.
Yeah.
So now everyone says everything, but it has no fucking meaning, and no one does anything.
Yeah, and the other side of it too, like if we're talking about like the leadership side of things, like I pulled up Michael on Monday's workout because I'm like, you went for a 1RM during the component that was
I
strictly
was wondering, sorry. I
80 to
literally
85%,
thought that when
yeah.
I saw that reel, I was like, did that bitch fucking go over 85%?
Yeah,
Then it
so
was 85%.
I pulled him up because I was like, look what your behavior did. I was like 6:30
Actually, fair, because then you see people fucking
going for
doing
1RMs.
it.
Six people went for 1RMs, I counted.
Wow.
Whereas in the 6:30 class, nobody went over 85%. So, and my point was, I didn't have a go at him because he went for a 1RM. I had a go at him because he's in a position of influence.
In a position of influence.
And even though he felt good, and I was like, and I would have been okay with, workouts over, now start going for the 1RM outside of the gym, like the class period. And then if people choose to, that's up to them. But I was like, hang on. But then on the other side of it, not just to throw shade at Michael and put him down all the time, he's also the same type of person as a leader who will be the first to show up and the last to leave. So as a employee, it gives me the motivation of, hey, like, instead of like Michael's just turning up and fucking off, like, and being like, oh, you're good, bro, you can take the rest of the afternoon, it's like 4 hours left. He'll be like, hey, bro, like, I can take this class for you, or like, I can take that client. And it's like, for me, it's like, oh, like, I would do that for him, because leaders should be influenced by their employees, but they should also lead by, like you said, example.
I got a lot of messages where they were like, they did ask if we can do some long format.
Yeah, longer.
I agree. And this is what I was saying to someone, I don't remember. People like natural flow when you just have a conversation. And you just get lost in the listening to it.
You were really engaged then. Like, as an example,
Yeah.
So she's not even part of that conversation, but she wanted to be part of that conversation.
Yeah. The relatability. It was the relatability. And what a lot of people don't realize is how hard it is to get on. And we sound pretty natural, but like, you go back to first episode I was on with Matt, like episode 7 or whatever it was. You go back to episode 1 that Michael and Matt did, like, completely different conversations, like very, very like clunky. Like, it feels like it's not feeling like a podcast. It doesn't feel as professional, but now we're episode 33. We've had 33 opportunities to refine and to get used to this format. So it's one of those things, like, you just got to keep at it. And like, I have a lot of respect for a lot of people who come on and it's their first turn, and it's like you're hearing yourself talk in the mic, hearing the other person trying to think of a response, like thinking about your own life. It's very hard to, keep things flowing. But
it happens. There's a lot of distractions, so it happens a lot slower initially. Like, you got a mic in front of your face, you got lights, you've got cameras. It takes a while to get rid of it. Imagine trying to have a conversation with someone one-on-one, and you have 5 other people just staring next to you, just watching the conversation. That's probably how it feels.
Yeah, no. Today's episode, which we've pretty much covered a lot of what we're going to talk about, which is satisfaction and building fulfillment. I got a little quote from Seneca on the idea of fulfillment and how to find true happiness. And true happiness is to enjoy the present without anxiety or dependence on the future. Not to amuse ourselves with either hopes or fears, but to rest satisfied with what we have, which is sufficient, for he that is so wants nothing. The blessings of mankind are within us and within our reach. A wise man is content with his lot, whatever it may be, without wishing for what he has not. So the idea behind that quote is pretty much, fulfillment doesn't have to be, the Lamborghini, the 6-figure job, the, wife and the house with the 2 kids. It can be whatever you determine it to be, but it needs to be something that every day you wake up and you're fulfilled. When you buy a Lamborghini, from my understanding, I don't own a Lamborghini, but once you get that shiny item, you want the next shiny item. So it can't be something that's not immediate. It needs to be something that you've either earned over a prolonged period of time, or that has consistent progression that you're able to build on.
We've spoken about this before, where we were talking about quality of living as an example, and we go quality of living, let's say, for example, people talking about the stresses at the moment with the economy, things are going backwards. But the quality of living will never be enough. You're going to go from 1-bedroom house to now I want 2-bedroom, now 3-bedroom, now 4-bedroom. And the concept in its own never ends. And that's what you're talking about. Like, so you do need to find satisfaction and fulfillment in the day-to-day. That's where enjoying life lies.
And like you were saying before, like, completing that task that you came upstairs and you were like, either I look at my phone or I wash the dishes. What's more fulfilling? You look at the phone and it's just the next message, the next reel scroll, the next email that you read. But if you clean the dishes, they're dirty now, they're clean at the end, you've achieved something. So it's like, now I feel actually fulfilled in the moment because now the sink is clean, my mind is clean. But the phone's always messy. There's always people messaging, buzzes, rings, etc. So there's a lot of extra stimulation that comes from it, and you're never truly satisfied by looking at your phone. That's actually one thing that I've prided myself on.
You want more.
Yeah, you always want more, and that's the thing. Like you go to like an event, or you go out with friends, or you go for a walk, and someone's always on their phone scrolling, and I'm like, why? Like, who's more important than me right now? Like, and I don't mean to say that in an arrogant way, but it's like, if we're truly friends, like, are you talking to someone more important than me because that's why you've got your phone out? Even if I was just to hold my phone and wave it around, you wouldn't feel like the most important person in the room, would you? Because you'd be like, why the hell is he holding his phone? We've referred it to importance, like, oh, is work calling, is, you know, the missus or the best friend messaging you, like, why are they so concerned about their phone? And that's the same thing with building fulfillment. Like, why not be happy with the moment in the present situation that you're in?
And on that note, for those listening, if you do have any kind of pushback on that, just think about this concept. When last did you go talk to your neighbors? When last did you even meet your neighbors? All right, like, whether you live in an apartment complex or whether you just live somewhere, like, you're talking about your home, like your safe place, and you don't know your neighbors.
Yeah.
Like, we are more connected than ever, but not to the people closest to us and the people that actually impact our lives, which is very scary.
It's actually funny you say that, because after the last time you mentioned that in, I think it was a previous podcast, episode 28 or 29 or something like that, I actually went and met 3 of my neighbors. So one of them lost his cat, came and knocked on the door. It was very scary. There's a horror movie going on, and there's a real knock at 7 a.m. at night, 7 p.m. You're like, oh my God, like, what the hell? And then it turned out his cat was missing, and then I talked to him for a little bit because I've seen his cat around, and then like a bit of conversation went on, like, oh, we own the orange cat, you have the white cat. Eventually he found it and he came over and thanked us, you know, oh, like, thanks for looking out, blah, 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 blah. And then the next time, the dog we're looking after got out, and the other neighbor picked it up, and they were like, oh, we have sausage dogs of our own, we understand they can just get out of anywhere. They offered us some bricks that they had at their house to try and help keep him in, which worked. And it was like, you know, the generosity of the people around you, like, not everyone's out to get you, and I get that. Like, it's not like, you know, it's not like that everyone's inherently bad or everyone's antisocial. It's just that we live in a day and age where you don't need to talk to your neighbor because you've got your phone. You can, you know, get your Uber Eats. You can do whatever. Like, it's all at a touch of our hands, and it's not so like personal anymore. And yeah, like, you're right. Like, how do you feel safe not knowing who lives left and right of you and what their tendencies are and what they do? So
yeah, I guarantee you most people couldn't even tell me what their job is.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what's your neighbor's name and what is their occupation? You should know that.
Yeah, because then it's like, well, you could lean on them too. Like, you could be like, hey, like, such and such is, you know, they're a carpenter, electrician. Maybe I, instead of going, you know, calling some random that I don't trust, I can just get someone who's local who I can support their business. And that's the whole thing with, like, a CrossFit affiliate. People come in, they've got all different jobs and trades, and you can help each other. Like, oh, I need a service, you know, you'll give me mates rates, but you also do a good job and I'm giving you money, so it's giving you free, like, easy service, so everyone's winning, instead of just, like, you know, outsourcing constantly.
And that's how humanity functions best.
Yeah.
So if you look at, like, any of the huge changing events, it's always working together.
Exactly.
So we joke about it all the time, independence doesn't really exist anymore. No. Everything you do is benefiting from someone else's hard work. Whether it's us using the internet that's maintained by someone else, whether it's us going and using a phone that we didn't even develop. It's got 400 parts from 15 different countries.
Yeah. Like, it was that email you told me about by Steve Jobs, where he emailed himself pretty much saying, and I'm paraphrasing, that, you know, you aren't as important as you think you are. Like, you didn't build the roads, pave the roads that you drive on. You didn't, you know, make the food that you eat. You don't drink the, like, you know, clean the water that you drink. So, like, why do you think you're better than anyone? Like, you know, you are only a very small fraction of such a big world, and everyone has their working part, whether it's within your business or within the actual world itself. And it's funny because you also told me that story about the guy who tried to make his own sandwich. It took him 9 months, $16,000. And at the end of it, like, he had a pretty damn tasting sandwich, but like how much effort went into just a sandwich that you could go to get at a convenience store and just buy for like $5. So it's crazy to think about that kind of stuff. But talking about satisfaction and I guess, becoming more fulfilled or building fulfillment, what would you say that someone can do to implement this into their own lives?
It's the positive mindset. So everything that you think you need, you already have. All right. So it's all on us. It's how we process things. It's how we think about things. Our mindset is the one thing that we can actually control. We talk about this all the time, where it's like that conscious thought will then become a behavior, then that behavior becomes a habit, then that habit becomes your reality. But it has to start with that thought. And it's not saying that you're not going to have negative thoughts. Everyone does. It's just being aware of it, making sure that you go, okay, well, this person didn't message me back. They probably don't like me. Reality is you just rephrase that and you go, this person didn't message me back because they're busy and they're working really hard. I really like that in someone.
Yeah.
And you will be surprised at how much of a happier person, how much fulfillment you'll have in such little things when you just start to train yourself that way. And it will start to express itself in everything else.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, even just misreading someone's message, they could just be like, oh, like, I didn't like the way that you did that. And then you could read that 9 different ways. Like, I hated the way you did that. Or like, haha, I didn't really like the way you did that. Like, how can you take seriously what someone said from a message? But 90% of it is how you interpret it. Because like, text doesn't really make any emotional difference. Like, you can add emojis, you can, have quotations and all these different ways to phrase a specific sentence on a text message. But how do you exactly know what it is without the actual person saying it and you being able to read their body language?
How you're feeling at the time is how you will interpret that message. So if you're feeling lonely and you're having negative thoughts, the other person on the other side could be extremely happy, having an awesome day, and they could just write a short 2-word message, but you're going to interpret it as negative.
Yeah, and you're like, why aren't you giving or investing more time into me? And it's just that unfortunate lack of communication in that moment. Like you said, that misinterpretation. And it's to rephrase what you said, thoughts become your words, words become your actions, actions dictate the way that you live your life. So if you're thinking negatively, you're usually going to be negative, you're going to act negative, and then the rest of your life becomes negative. And it's the same with positivity too. But don't think positive, think realistic as well. Like, positive thinking is the optimist. The optimist is good in a lot of ways. They're better than the pessimist, who's like always down, like, oh, this isn't going to work, or we're not going to get where we're going to get. Whereas the optimistic person's like, yay, like, this will be good, like, don't worry guys, like, the next time we're going to get it. It's like, a realist is like, I don't have it yet because I haven't done this, this, and this. If I start doing these things, or when I start doing these things, I will get X goal, Y, achieve Z, you know what I mean? So yeah. It's like
you want to be smack bang in the middle. You want to understand both sides of it, and you want to try and sit in the middle.
And that's the realist, someone who understands that there's the pessimistic side of things where, like, things can go wrong, and then the optimistic about it, like, I will learn from the things that go wrong. That's how you become a realist.
There's opportunity in everything. You just have to find it.
And exactly. And talking about fulfillment, we were talking about earlier about the whole idea of holiday, and people who hate work. They take holidays away from their work, away from their life, away from their kids, whatever it is they're trying to escape. And the holiday then becomes an escape short term that breeds long term poor habits. Talk more about what your thoughts are on holidays and how to restructure or reframe our mind when we're looking at taking a holiday.
Yeah, so we were having a discussion earlier, and key thing for everyone here, discussion is key. So discussion means you go down some of these rabbit holes and ask questions that maybe you don't want to ask, and you think about it, and you try and come up with a more positive solution. And what we were talking about is what we would deem as a positive behavior being rewarded with a negative behavior. And the example we were using is the holiday. So it's like, I'm going to work really hard for this duration of time. It might be 4 weeks, all right? Now I'm going to go onto a holiday for 2 weeks, not work at all and do nothing and be lazy. So you're rewarding a very positive behavior, which is the hustle, the discipline, the day-to-day, making sure that you put in more effort than you maybe previously were. So that constant improvement, and you're moving forward. And then you reward yourself with the opposite behavior. We see this with food as well as a classic example. I'm going to eat really well, be disciplined and organized, and then on the weekend, I'm rewarding myself by not being disciplined and organized with shitty, crappy foods. And it's like, the question is that actually really healthy? Or are we eventually going to reinforce the negative behavior to a point where it becomes really hard to come back from?
And that's the other side of it too. Like, the pushback a lot of people will say is, I don't hate my job, or it's not the training routine. Like, the pushback is like, oh, like I can't be disciplined all the time. It's too hard. Or, you know, I just want to relax for a little bit. I don't want to be going all the time, like go, go, go. And it's like, okay, well, if you balance and structured your life in a way that allows you to be consistent over the longest period of time, you will see the most results, rather than doing the hard 75 and then doing the really shitty, crappy 300 days of the rest of the year, and not having the results that you want. And that's what it was saying. It's like, it's not saying don't take a time off to go away and experience things and travel and enjoy life. It's just that don't do it as a way to escape your shitty reality that you are trying to get rid of. Like, oh, I don't like my job. Well, and it sounds hard and it might require some maneuvering, but maybe look at how you can change your current circumstances or scenario.
Yeah, and you rephrase it in a positive way, where it's like, it's not a holiday and a break from your life. It's an opportunity to travel and experience.
Yeah.
So your reward is just another positive reward. And then what we were talking about before, now you're starting to teach that positive behavior. No matter what life throws at you, you are always going to find opportunity and growth because you're in that state. As where a lot of us end up in the negative state where we panic, we get anxious, we can't think clearly, we have no idea how to take action, and then nothing happens. All we do is reinforce the behavior and we get stuck in that loop, so we never move forward.
Yeah, and it's the whole mindset. Chris William X talks actually about it. It's I'm gonna paraphrase this, but essentially, if you had to go a mile, you know, you would walk, but if you had to go 2 miles, you'd drive, and you would get there faster by driving 2 miles than walking 1. The whole idea is, you know, if a job is shitty, but you have decent employees, like maybe the pay's good, like the hours work for you, but you are generally unfulfilled with your job, you won't leave because those other things are not bad enough that, you know, will tip you over the edge and force you to leave, but they're not good enough that you're actually happy with what you're doing. But, you know, if you showed up to work the next day, your boss punched you in the face and then called you a piece of shit, and then everyone laughed at you, and then your pay got cut in the same day, you would leave. Like, you would not stand for that. You'd be like, I'm leaving, I need to find another job. But why does it take all of that to realize? And maybe a bit of a fun exercise is, if you find yourself going away on holiday or taking that extra vacation and you're kind of like, I really don't want to go back to work or back to reality, then find out why. Like, what is making you so unhappy with your current reality, and make some improvements or start to create a structured plan to try and fix that, to try and make it into a place where when you go away on like holiday or travel or go for an experience, you're wanting to go back because you're like, I miss the routine, I miss showing up to the gym that many times a day, and the actual experience is worse than your regular life, which I know it doesn't have to be all the time, but like, that's how good your structured routine is. That's how fulfilled you are with work, with life, with family, because when you come back to it, you're like, wow, like I love this, like this is why I want to be here. I enjoyed that experience and I took a lot away from that, but that's not my life. This is my life.
The worst thing you can do is run away and not deal with it.
Exactly.
Like, unfortunately, you just have to deal with it. And it's going to take a lot of growth. It takes a lot of self-reflection. You're going to feel sad. You're going to feel anxious. And then at the end of it, you're going to feel happy. You're going to feel fulfilled because you've gone through that process rather than avoiding it.
Yeah, and that's probably the biggest takeaway from today's podcast. Michael and I talk about satisfaction and building fulfillment. If you have any questions or you want us to cover any of those points specifically, don't hesitate to reach out to us either on Instagram @UnboundAthletic or on this podcast itself, and we'll see you on episode 24.
Let's hit that mindset.
Actually, 34. I got that wrong. 34.